Hello and welcome to another episode. I appreciate you all tuning in again, and today, the topic I want to discuss is why I continuously struggle with letting what I do impact the value that I feel that I have. And I think this is something that a lot of folks, struggle with at different points in their life, maybe for their whole life. But it's, why does my job title, career, success, or aspirations kind of dictate the self-worth that I feel? And I've gotten better at this over time, but it's definitely a journey with ebbs and flows. And I think that, I'll feel so high and positive when I get the accolades at work or I achieve success, big or small. And then also when I go, periods without seeing the fruits of my labor and knowing it's a long game, there's this feeling of not doing enough, not enough. And so kind of just want to dig into that in a little more detail today. And I think for me, I was very fortunate to have a lot of success early on in my career. And even before that with sports and in school with academics, being able to achieve, or I guess have awards bestowed upon me, right, that I feel like I earned, being, a high caliber player on the football team or the basketball team or, running track, whatever it may be. And there was a lot of self-worth associated with being an athlete, being the best, scoring the most, And I think that served me in a lot of ways of that grind, just continuously pushing forward. But what I found is in those moments of silence when I'm just alone and you're not around the group of people that are kind of lifting you up in that way, there can be this void of, why am I chasing external validation or external success factors, and why am I letting that dictate how I feel about myself? Because the reality is that I should have, that unconditional love for myself regardless of the situation, because life's going to keep lifing. There's going to be highs, there's going to be lows, and it's great to experience that. It's great to care about it, have a vested interest, right? That's going to help with that sense of purpose. But it can't be the end-all, be-all. That can't be the only place or the main place that I'm getting that sense of worth from. And so for me, early in my career, I was able to have a fair number of promotions, achieve success, kind of outpace people. And I think that continued to exacerbate that feeling. I was also at the time undiagnosed with a mental health condition that I think also, probably had an impact on it. But I don't think that it was as impactful as what I think sometimes. And what I mean by that is I think that achieving that success and just growing up in an environment where it's very much success-oriented, outcomes-oriented, that's just what I was accustomed to, what I was used to. And that's how, the folks around me kind of thought about self-worth as well. And where that really started to shift for me was really probably after getting married, but like in my late 20s, started to look inward a little bit more instead of just, having self-awareness from a logical perspective. It's easy to say, I know I should feel this way or think this way. But it was totally different to actually connect that and go from thinking it to feeling it on a consistent basis. And so I started to journal more, and that really helped kind of put, especially with gratitude, like being grateful for things both big and small, but putting that at the forefront of my mind. I'm grateful for the ability to get up today. I'm grateful for the opportunity to go work out, to invest in these relationships, right? To go to work and have a chance of achieving success. But really trying to tie a lot of those grateful things to the journey or the exercise to get there, and not as much on that outcome that may or may not happen. And so, took a trip to Arizona in the late, it was after COVID, so it was like 2022, and maybe 23. But took this trip out there, and I was fortunate enough to go on this guided meditation with my wife and my parents, and which can sound daunting, at times. But for me, I knew I was searching for something, and I was very open and transparent about this is for me. I mean, we were all doing it for our own kind of reasons, but together. But I didn't have any kind of shame or fear of exposing this emotional side or seeing kind of what would happen. And so I had the opportunity to go up to Sedona for a day when we were in Arizona and do this guided meditation. And what that really looked like was we went to this kind of remote trail. Our guide met us there, and we went on this 4-hour experience. The day, it was January in Arizona, so it was 70 degrees in the Phoenix area and about 50 in Sedona. There was actually snow on the Red Rocks, with some of the melt kind of trickling down, so you could see some of these streams, and it was just a beautiful experience. And the guide said, this is a very unique day. We only get this 10 or 15 times a year. And so that already kind of set off this journey as, wow, this might be an experience, I'm not going to put too much in the outcome because I don't know what will happen, but I know that I want to be fully present in this moment, and that's my whole goal, just to continuously be present, be mindful, and kind of follow the directions without any expectation of what will come. And so we did some chit-chatting, and then we start off on this hike. And, we walk for 20 minutes or so, and then we kind of go around a bend, duck behind a couple trees, and all of a sudden come out in this big open clearing, right, where you can see all the red rocks around. There's trees everywhere. And so the guide says, okay, go ahead and spread out. So we all spread out, and then she's like, I'm going to talk you through our first stage of this meditation. I was like, sweet, sounds great. So she goes, all right, close your eyes. Did some centering, and then she goes, okay, now when you open your eyes, I want you to see all of the green, all the different shades of green, the leaves, the pines, the sky, anything that you see that's green. See how many different shades that you can see. And we'll do a 360, and we'll do that, 3 or 4 times. So we did that. And then next was, okay, now see the browns, right? The browns and the reds within the rocks. And then we did the blues. And so you kind of kept going down. And what it kind of did, especially from a breathwork perspective, is it really started to center me in this place where I'm at. Not just kind of glossing over and seeing at the abstract or the high level that, oh yeah, the tree is green. There's some grass over there, but the tree has 7 different shades of green. These needles are about to fall off, and they're a different color than these other ones. And as it may seem kind of minuscule, but what it really did is, as you get finer and finer and finer into that detail and that perception, it started to make the moment longer. It started to make seconds feel a little longer, right? Not like minutes, but it just started to slow down time. And so that was kind of the first step in understanding, okay, here's where we're at, what we're doing. And then we all kind of felt this sense of peace. And then from there, it was, ask what you want out of this experience. And so everyone went around and said, really what they were looking for, struggling with. And for me specifically, it was wanting to understand how to embrace the journey, knowing that there could be both joy and heartache at the other end of it. And regardless of the outcome, how can I not try to fast forward through that and embrace all of the emotion that would come? And so then we go to the next phase. And so we go on another 20 minutes or so, continuing to go through the red rocks. And then we stop somewhere else, and we're able to do a 5-minute breath work meditation, continuing to center. And that really was kind of the next step of just this in-between of what we were about to go through. And so then we hike for another, 30 minutes or so, and we get to this extremely kind of remote flat. It looked like something out of a Western movie, where you're just looking out over the canyon. It looked like we could see for miles and miles. It was like if it felt like we were in the heart of the chakra, basically. There was just this feeling, right? And you could really start to feel the energy and the essence of Sedona, but also our intentions were starting to kind of come out at this point. And so the next thing we did was she asked us, if we wanted to, took off our shoes, and it was cold, but I still took off my shoes, my socks, wanted to be grounded. That's one of the things that they'll tell you when you go there, like for the chakras, the energy, things of that nature, like you don't want the rubber on your soles of your feet because that can actually like impede some of that. So doing it barefoot, much better experience. And so did that. Just close your eyes and started to talk through this longer meditation. And so it was maybe a minute or two into it, and all of a sudden I just felt this immense kind of an implosion of energy and emotion. And then it was like I shot straight up into outer space, and I could just envision this little like cube. It was like, and it felt like the essence of who I was. Like it was really like my spirit. And then there was just this overwhelming, I'm kind of getting goosebumps right now, but there was this overwhelming experience or feeling of unconditional love. It wasn't words, but it was communicated in a way that I understood, like the language, and it was, you are enough, you are loved, just being you is fine. That is all we can ever be. And so, this experience was probably honestly like 20 to 30 seconds, but it felt like, truly time stopped in that. And I never felt that amount of kind of love before. And it felt like I was connected to everyone that I love that has passed away, that my future self, future kid, your kids, were there, kind of family, just this whole experience of like everything is connected. We are all the same, but we're all different at the same time, and that's okay. So when I come back, I'm just pouring tears, but I'm not like, right? It's just like streaming out of me. It's like I'm leaking. I can't help it. But that really changed everything, in that instance, for me, because it allowed me to truly understand what being in the moment can look like, and also that a feeling that I never experienced before. And I think part of me believes that I was able to have this experience because of breaking down that barrier of trying to kind of gloss over things or speed through the journey. And the intention was really on embrace the journey, be in the moment, take these baby steps forward, and if nothing happens, nothing happens. But it's still going to be a great, 4-hour experience, but you can't really put all of the emphasis on the outcome. But because I didn't, I think I got such a powerful outcome. And so there's more, that occurred afterwards that I'll probably get into on later episodes. But it's really that particular moment that I wanted to kind of dial in on. And this concept of the love was coming externally, but it really felt like it was coming like through me. It was almost like when lightning strikes, right? It's going to come up and down, and I was able to like receive it, my antenna, to kind of tap into this existence, this field, this energy, this love that I'd heard about, strived for, but I never like truly experienced it for myself. And it did feel like self-love, and I feel like it was maybe a strong example of the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. But as we were, driving back to Phoenix, which is, a couple hour drive, I just couldn't stop talking about it. We all kind of shared what our experience was, and it was clear that mine was far and away kind of the most, I don't know, hallucinogenic is the right word, but I was transformed and I was transmitted, somewhere else for that period. But I think because my parents were aware of some of my mental health, the condition and the struggles and what I was going through, and they were looped into like some of the treatment and things like that, they were able to, through that process, kind of see the light come back into the world for me. But even more so, they were able to see kind of after this night and day type experience of how I was acting, and not acting in a negative way, right? But I just seemed so much lighter, so much happier, but in the sense that I could just experience happiness, and when it went away, it wasn't a sadness of it's gone. It was a gratefulness or thankfulness that in that moment I had the opportunity to experience it, and hopefully it comes back again. But I'm gonna smile because it happened. I'm not gonna cry because it's gone. And so as I kind of circle back to kind of this whole self-worth and what you do isn't who you are. Those are the stories that I come back to, right? And then I'm also reminded of it, like this past week I had the opportunity to reconnect with a colleague or former colleague, right? We hadn't seen each other in a year and a half or so. But as soon as we saw each other, there was a big hug, a big embrace, and our hour-long dinner turned into a 3-hour conversation. And what it really kind of clued in for me there was we're just leaning into each other as humans, as people, of what we're struggling with our partners, what we're aspiring to at work, but really work was a very minimal part of the conversation, right? There's so much more just about, who we are and sharing that energy, those feelings. And I think the more that I interact with people like that, whether they're strangers, reconnections, or folks I talk to, every day, it's more and more clear and evident that we're all just humans trying to make it through, and someone might have a very lucrative job and a lot of success today. That doesn't mean it'll be the case tomorrow, and vice versa. But that's at least not what my relationships have been built on. And I think that, in the past, some of that might have been the case, right? When you're trying to climb the ladder, network your way to a specific job or opportunity, or whatever that looks like. Within sports, it's continuously about performance. But then when you get away from it, you think about the locker room, the struggle, going through the journey, and that's really what binds us together. And so, in closing, I think for me, it's really about trying to, when I feel that sense of kind of disillusionment, when it's about what am I achieving? What am I doing? How are others going to perceive me as being successful or not successful? I got to kind of hit that pause button. I need to go back to gratitude, to breath work, to some journaling, to think about, for me, like Sedona, or those experiences with some of these, friends or former colleagues or strangers, where all of a sudden we're all just humans, trying to make it through, and we are enough. Like that alone is enough, that we have this shared human experience. And so we're all trying our best, but don't get so caught up in getting to the peak of the mountain, because so many times you got to start at the valley to get there. And then once you hit the peak, you got to go back to the valley to get to the next one. And we really need to think about just putting that foot in front of the other, making those baby steps along the way. And if we focus on that, I have no doubt that great outcomes are going to come, but they're also going to probably mean more, because we've really embraced what it means to be in the moment, going through this particular journey. And there's so many memories and experiences along that way that may actually mean more than looking out over, the peak or the high that is the outcome of that particular journey. So, yeah, I'd love to, drop a comment if you have something similar, or, this did or didn't resonate. Would love to kind of hear your feedback there. And, hopefully everyone can just take a second and look in the mirror and say, you are enough, because you really are. No matter what you're going through right now, you're where you're supposed to be. And this too shall pass, both good and bad. So keep trekking along and try to embrace those moments along the way.